question's going to be used against me in a court of law.
It might be. Never know. Okay, Dad. So, where were you and how did you find out about 9/11?
I was at work at 700 Tower Drive in Troy, Michigan, and I overheard some coworkers talking about some airplane that had crashed into a building, but I didn't really hear that it was a World Trade Center or where it was located or where they had done it until a little bit later. But one of my managers came out and said, "You guys can go home." And I'm thinking, why? For what? What are we going home? Didn't you hear? You know, airplane had crashed into the World Trade Center. So it seemed like, I mean, that was pretty early in the morning, right? Because it happened pretty early. So, or I remember going home and turning the TV on and stuff and watching the coverage from that point. So that's where I was.
So what were your first reactions and feelings when you first heard?
Well, the day of, I think I thought it was an accident. Like, I can't imagine. I didn't think at first it was terrorism, or I didn't think it was something that was planned or plotted. I thought it was. Of course, I think that was. I can't remember if the second one had come in just yet or not. But the fact that two did it, then we realized this is not right. So I didn't really have initially any feelings of a terrorist attack or anything like that. I always thought it was accidental.
But how did it affect the people around you?
How did it affect the people around me?
How were they acting? Did they seem really sad or angry about it or anything like that?
Well, I remember when I was at work, they were like, wow, that's not something that happens obviously every day or very often. So there was a lot of shock, a lot of what's going on? This is crazy. Who would do this, or how did this happen? So yeah, just a sense of is this, what's going on? This is really out of the ordinary, and it's not typical. So.
Did you ever think it was going to affect the U.S. as much as it has?
Well, I think once we found out that it was terrorism, and obviously that Al-Qaeda took responsibility for it, that yeah, we were going to go to war basically over this. I mean, from the get-go, I thought we had to get the people that did this, and so I supported the president going after obviously the people that did this, and so yeah, it did seem obviously like it was a premeditated attack on the United States to hurt us, to in the financial heart of our country, and so I was all for justice being served.
Did you have what did you feel on the 10th anniversary? Was there any kind of sadness or anything when you remembered?
Yeah, I mean, anything like that where you're remembering, there's there was a lot of TV shows and a lot of specials about those events, and so I felt bad for the people that were involved, and of course the first responders and everybody that had really been affected by 9/11. But I think too, I mean, even though yes, it was a terrible thing, terrible tragedy. Unfortunately, we have terrible tragedies happening every day, and not just in the United States, but all over the world. People starving. There's earthquakes. There's tsunamis, and all of this is, tragic for people, especially those who are not saved, who don't know the Lord. So I just felt for Yeah, I felt for the country. I felt for President Bush because felt he was very justified in going after these guys, and yet has received a lot of slack about doing it. So.
Well, thank you. Goodbye, Mr. Johnson.
Is this goodbye, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Tumnus?
Hi, Patty.
Hi.
So, where were you, and how did you find out about 9/11?
I was teaching middle school science at Oakland Christian. I was in the middle school science room, and it was my break hour, and I had gone up to the office and heard about it. And at that time I had a TV in my classroom, so I turned it on and watched for the rest of my prep period what was going on the news.
And what were your first reactions when you found out about it?
First reactions was mostly Justin was working at the Armory in Detroit as active duty military, so I called to find out what was going on, and to try and figure out what was going to happen at that point, because it was, you knew no matter what the reason was, you knew it was going to change a lot of things. And we had I had a couple of students who were asking me how close the World Trade Center was to certain buildings in New York because their parents were there at the time on business, and having not been to New York at that point, I didn't know how to tell them if their parents were in a safe place or not in the city.
So, like, how did it affect the people around you? Were they all kind of freaked out and sad?
A lot of the students kind of just sat and didn't really say much. I had one student who passed out from just overwhelmed by it all. But then I had other students who by the end of the day said, we can't talk about it anymore, we don't want to think about it, we just no more. And so the people in the building trying to track down and make sure people they knew were safe, but students also wanting to get word from their parents who were in New York at the time.
Okay. How did you feel on the 10th anniversary, remembering what happened?
Being tied to the military, it's hard because I know a lot of people who have lost people because of that, whether in the attacks at the Pentagon or whether in the war since.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.